Hello and good evening. Welcome to today's class. Today we're going to be talking about the clinical trial protocol. The clinical trial protocol is a very important document. In fact, it's going to be one of the most important documents in your career as a clinical research associate. During the clinical research protocol, you're going to be using this document, I'll say every day of your life. It's going to be an everyday document because it's a document. It's like a Bible in research. Think about the clinical research protocol as the document that you refer to every time you have a question. So the protocol is supposed to have all the questions, all the answers to every question that you have about a particular study. My name is Rudolph Male. I'm going to be your instructor for this class. I'm a trained certified clinical research professional. I have a 7+ years experience in clinical research. I have worked in clinical research from clinical research site, CRO, pharmaceutical company. I'm currently a clinical trial manager. I currently have multiple jobs and also have my consulting business, which I'm also serving clinical research sites. And I'm very excited to have this class with you today. Our learning objective for this class primarily for us to understand, to define what a clinical research protocol is, explain the need for a protocol, describe the basic structure of a protocol, discuss the significance of every section in the protocol, and of course, overall discuss the role of a clinical research associate in the protocol development. So, what do you mean by understanding the protocol? According to the ICH guidelines, a protocol document is a document that describes the objectives, the design, methodology, statistical considerations, and the organization of a clinical trial. That's the definition of a protocol when you look at it in the ICH GCP regulation standard. A protocol gives the background and the rationale for the trial. What's a rationale? A rationale means that it gives a reason why we are going to study that particular drug. It is written by the sponsor, the investigator, or a team of different professionals within a clinical research field. What is a clinical trial protocol? A clinical trial protocol is first of all, just define what a clinical trial is, right? Because now the clinical trial protocol will be everything that we have to do about the clinical trial. So a clinical trial is a systematic study of safety and efficacy of an investigational product on human beings. What does that mean? It means that we're trying to understand a systematic study. We're trying to study the safety and the effectiveness of a particular drug on human beings. This drug has not been approved by the FDA. It's still within research. We are testing of an investigational product on human beings require precise planning, method of execution under a set of guidelines. So you can't just wake up one morning and say, hey, I'm going to conduct a study today. You actually have to follow specific guidelines because you're going to be testing this drug on humans. It doesn't mean that if the trial or this protocol is not being written for humans, it doesn't mean that it's not going to be precise. It doesn't mean that it's not going to be carefully executed. It has to be carefully executed. It has to be precise. Reason why? It has to follow set guidelines because those set guidelines will determine what kind of study it's going to be performing and overall what the requirements will be for every step of the way when it comes to the implementation of that study. In order to avoid any deviation in the working standard, because think about it, if you are conducting a clinical research study, you have one doctor in Cameroon, one doctor in Canada, and another doctor in America. You say, hey guys, I want you guys to conduct a clinical research study for diabetes, for type 2 diabetes. Go ahead. What do you think is going to happen? The three doctors will have different definition of what a study will look like. First of all, they'll have different ways of doing their study. And that, of course, will mean that they will not have an opportunity. There is no set standard There's no standard for them to perform that study. Everybody will conduct that study according to what they like, according to their own understanding of how they are going to conduct the study. At the end of the day, that's going to be a waste of time because there will be no results. The results that we generated in Cameroon, the results generated in Canada will not match because there is no standard to make sure that everybody follows that same standard. So the protocol comes in place now to do what? To ensure that there is a precise standard of practice, which means everybody must follow that same pattern. Because at the end of the day, they want to make sure that you're able to get the actual expected result that they want from the study. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So these guidelines are detailed in something called a clinical research protocol. Now, why do we need the protocol? Now, why do we need a clinical trial protocol at all? First of all, it is a regulatory requirement. A sponsor, if you are a sponsor, you go to this, you say, hey, I want to conduct a study today. Okay. You have to, before you conduct a study on human beings, you have to get approval from the FDA. Now, the FDA's role, the FDA's responsibility is to ensure safety on human beings across the United States. So FDA is responsible to ensure that every drug that goes into our mouth, every lotion that we put on our body has been verified, and make sure that that verification process has been approved before the pharmaceutical company or the company is selling it to us, or the supplier or the manufacturer. So in order for FDA to qualify that manufacturing company for them to be able to sell that medication to you, FDA will tell them that you need to provide me with a protocol. You need to provide me with a set of standard. That set of standard will enable me to know that you are serious, because that set of standard will provide step-by-step guidelines on what you are supposed to do, on what you intend to do in the conduct of study. They answer clinical problems, and they also disqualify or prove the hypothesis. They help you to gain the knowledge about the established drug. They support the claim for gaining government regulatory approval, safeguard the health of the participants, as well as answer specific research questions to provide reference to local research team. Because like we talked about earlier, right? If you have a doctor in North Carolina, I have a doctor in Maryland, expecting them to conduct research, at the end of the day, what you're going to have is you're going to have two different doctors doing research differently. At the end of the day, what happens is that you're not going to be able to get the result that you expect. That's why you're setting the standard. That standard means you're telling the doctors, if you are going to participate in my study, you must follow these rules. You must follow the set standard. And some of the set standard will mean that on day one, a patient is supposed to come to your clinic on day one, they have to come on day two, they have to come in the next week, they have to be in 5 days. You cannot change that. If the patient comes in before 5 days or after 5 days, what does that mean? It's a protocol deviation, which means that the doctor has failed to follow the protocol. And you as the owner of the study, you as the pharmaceutical company or the manufacturer, you can punish them. Now, clinical trial protocol writing. Every protocol has to be written. The protocol didn't just pop up by itself. It has to be written. So it has to be written by either a team of people or by an investigator. Sometimes writing the protocol starts with a scientific question. Everyone involved in creating the protocol should have a clear idea of the primary research question being asked. Now, you have to understand that before we conduct research, right, there's always a question that we're trying to answer. Some of the questions may be, how can X medication work on patients who are how can X medication work on type 2 diabetes patients who are between the age of 18 to 50? That's the research question. Now, because you're not sure if that medication is going to work, so that's the question that you're asking, right? So you're asking that question. In order for you to answer that question, you now have to create a protocol that will provide a clear idea of how to answer that question. The objectives should be measurable, relevant, and feasible. Feasibility is very important. The study should be ethical. Everything should relate back to the research question. Of course, if you're preparing the research protocol, that research protocol should be able to answer, should go back to that research question to answer that particular question, because you can't just be going blindly. You can't just be setting up the study blindly without knowing step by steps of where you're heading to. Any questions so far?
No.
Okay. Protocol development steps. The following steps are involved in developing a protocol. We have the regulatory guidelines. We have the contributors as well. We have contributors and team members who can be involved in the development of the protocol. So once a protocol is developed, they usually prepare something called kind of a sketch, right? You can create a sketch where you're trying to figure out how things are going to work. So the sketch is usually we call it a synopsis or summary. After the steps, they're going to create something called a schedule of events. After the schedule of events, you're going to get now the actual protocol. Now, once you create the protocol, there's something called a protocol checklist. The protocol checklist now will mean that what? It means you are able to check that every section of that protocol has been written clearly according to ICS GCP guidelines. Now, there's something called amendment. Amendment simply means that you've written the protocol has been going on for a little bit, for a while. Then what happens after? You identify that, I need to make a change in this protocol. We need to update the protocol. Now, you cannot just update the protocol, or you can't just stop everybody who is you can't just stop all the patients in the study because you want to update the protocol. What you're going to do is to perform something called a protocol amendment. We're going to be seeing more of those in our subsequent lessons. Now, regulatory pathway to protocol development. The reason why I said regulatory pathway is because I want you to understand that the development of a clinical trial protocol is not just a fancy way of making things difficult. The development of a clinical trial protocol is actually a requirement by the ICH. So if you go through ICS GCP E6, section 6 is clearly written clinical trial protocol. Now, the clinical trial protocol has contents. The contents of that protocol is something that has to now be defined within that document. 21 CFR Part 312.3.23 establish the contents and the format of a protocol document. And also went ahead to talk about the amendment. Now, amendment of a protocol says that what? In section A, it says that new protocol, whenever a sponsor intends to conduct a study that is not covered by a protocol already contained in the IND, the sponsor shall submit to FDA a protocol amendment containing the protocol for the study. It means that the protocol must be written and sent to the FDA for review. FDA have to review the protocol, approve it before they can actually start the study. Now, changes in the protocol. A sponsor shall submit a protocol amendment describing any protocol that significantly affects the safety of subject, the scope of the investigation, or any scientific quality of the study. So that, like I mentioned earlier, if there's going to be any changes in that protocol, they can't just change the protocol at will. What they'll typically do is they will change the protocol, then they send it to the FDA to review. Once the FDA reviews and approves it, then they'll send it down to the site. Remember, one thing I want you to get very clearly, in the conduct of research, we have the doctor who is working at a site. We call him the investigator. We have the sponsor who is working at a pharmaceutical company. We call them the sponsor. They have the money, they have everything that they need, but now they don't have the patience, right? The doctor have the patience. So what do they have to do? They have to come and sign a contract with the doctor, telling the doctor, hey, doctor, I am a pharmaceutical company. I have a lot of money. I want to do research. I have a scientific question that I want to answer. I know you have patient population. Can you help me out to make sure that we can test this new medication on the patients? The doctor say, yeah, why not? Let's sign a contract. Then they sign a contract. When they sign a contract, then it becomes something that they are now in a contract agreement between the sponsor and the site. Clinical trial protocol development team. A clinical trial protocol may be written by a team of people. Now, a clinical trial protocol may be developed by a sponsor, right? Because there are two different kinds of studies. There can be an investigational initiated study, which is a study that's been conducted at the site, and the protocol for investigation initiated trials, we call them IIT. Those trials are usually written by the investigator at the site. That's the doctor. The doctor says, you know what, I want to write a study by myself. I want to write a study by myself. I want to answer this particular question, this particular scientific question that I have. Let me write a protocol about this particular drug, about this study that I want. Let me write a protocol and test it out. The doctor will go ahead, write out the protocol, then start conducting the study. Another scenario is when we have a pharmaceutical company. Pharmaceutical companies say, hey, I am a pharmaceutical company. I have money. I have a scientific question I want to answer. At the end of the day, I want to be able to have investigators who work with me. So the pharmaceutical company is going to create this study, create that protocol. Once they create the protocol, what happens now? They now send that protocol now to the study to the doctors to assist in conducting that study. The clinical trial protocol development team usually involve a lot of different professionals. We have a statistician. The statistician role is to design the clinical trial and provide the probable number of subjects to get significant results. There are different phases of clinical trial, like we saw the other day. Now, every phase of a clinical trial usually have a particular number of patient population that they expect during that trial. Now, a statistician will look at the study and say, I think that we can actually enroll 100 patients in order to answer our scientific question. That's the role of a statistician. The second person is a data manager. The data manager said they're going to provide inputs on the important points related to data collection tools and data handling. So the data manager will decide what EDC tools do we need to collect the data that we need for the study. What kind of data do we need for the study? Do we need to collect the height, the weight, the blood pressure? Do we need to collect the respiration? Do we need to collect blood samples? What kind of data do we need for the study? The clinician is able to assess the clinical aspect of the trial, including the clinical feasibility and also clinical parameters. Now, the clinician's job will look at us and say, okay, I am the clinician. How much amount of blood, how many tubes of blood can we collect from a patient that is safe for this study? Clinician will also say, what are the possibilities that a patient will have an adverse event for this study where they take this drug? A clinician will also take the responsibility to say that how can we expect that this research will be conducted effectively at the site? Is it even possible to conduct this research? Is it very difficult to perform or not? We have the study coordinator. Now, a study coordinator may not be the person that only works at a site. We also have a study coordinator that works at the sponsor's company. They can be called a clinical trial manager. They can be called a study coordinator, but all of these titles really interwove between each other. Now, the responsibility of a study coordinator or clinical trial manager is the expert that execute the trial. They are the expert that make sure that the clinicians, even though the clinician has said, oh, we're going to collect 2 tubes of blood today, from day 1, on day 2, we're going to collect 10 tubes of blood, right? So now the clinician's job, the coordinator job, is to make sure that they actually collect those samples and collect that data as required with that protocol. We also have a community representative. A community representative is somebody that, because now the protocol is written, right? We're not sure if the protocol is going to be, because the protocol was written to meet the standards of the sponsor or the investigator. But now, why are we including a community representative? A community representative is to ensure that the study provides ethical standards, it meets social benefits and acceptable within the community, right? A community representative will be somebody that does not have any clinical experience, no scientific experience, but the person is there as a patient advocate. They are there to say that anything that's good for the patient is what I'm standing for. If it's not going to be good for the patient, I'm out. I'm going to tell you guys that I don't like this study. Now, any question before we move to the next slide?
No, I'm okay. Bye.
Okay. Now, resources for developing a protocol. A protocol document, like we've seen in the previous slide, is not something that can be developed by, it can be developed by one person. But even the investigator, even the doctor who sits in the hospital and decide to create a protocol, they are not creating that protocol by themselves. They actually have other people involved. They also have a statistician involved. But now we all need to have source document, like where are we getting these resources to develop this protocol? We have SOPs. The SOPs can be the SOPs from the sponsor side. We have previous protocols. The sponsor may say, actually, maybe I'll look at my old protocol from a different study, decide to emulate, make sure it looks the same. They have investigator brochure. An investigator brochure is a document, which we're going to be seeing subsequently in other lectures. It's a document that actually have all basic information or historical information about that particular drug. They also have published literature. Published literature is something that other authors have posted online or in books that have been written in scientific books. Then the investigator or the physician or the sponsor will decide to read that particular literature and develop their own protocol based off that content. Now, what is the process of developing a protocol? Usually, everything begins with a draft. The sponsor will create a draft. They will have a draft of the document. The draft will be reviewed, internally reviewed. They will develop a final draft. The final draft will now be sent to the investigator to sign. After the investigator signs, then they send it for ethical committee approval. Now, ethical committee approval involves people like IRB, institutional review boards. Now, the structure of a protocol. This is one of the most important, like I mentioned in the beginning, this protocol document is going to be one of the most important documents that you're going to handle in your career. Because it's going to be a day-to-day document that contains everything that you need to know when it comes to research study. Now, the clinical trial protocol actually expands, according to ICH GCP regulation, should contain 15 sections, 15 points. I'll call it sections. So each section should have a combination of particular information. The first section here, as you can see, is general information. The general information usually talks about introduction about the study, what the drug is about, why we're doing this study. Section 2, talk about the background information. Section 3, trial objectives. Section 4, trial design, statistics, site selection, withdrawal of subjects, treatment of subject, assessment and safety, direct access to source documents, quality control, ethics, data handling and record keeping, financing and insurance, publication policy, and informed consent documents. We're going to begin by looking at the general information of a protocol. What is the general information? When we look at the protocol document, what does that really mean? I actually have an example of a protocol I'm going to share with you so you can see what the protocol actually looks like. How many pages? A protocol usually range between, just depending on the content, they're usually between over 30 pages, sometimes 30 to 40 pages, sometimes up to 50 pages. So the protocol usually depends on the amount of information that's relevant for that study. There are some protocols that are very extensive. Some protocols are like 150 pages. It just depends on the information or the content. So the general information page, the section, will contain things like the title page, the protocol title, the protocol identification number, the date. It should be an amendment number as well. It usually also contains the sponsor name, the sponsor address. It also have the monitor name, if you have a monitor on that study. So you that becomes a monitor for the study, your name is going to be on the protocol. Then your contact information is going to be there as well. If they have any, so what you're telling the site is that if they have any questions, give me a call, right? They have the name, the address, the telephone number of the sponsor or the medical expert. Sometimes even the medical monitor, their information will be on that general information section. The name and title of the investigator who is responsible for conducting the trial, the address and telephone number of the trial site. So if a trial site is the University of North Carolina Hospital, so North Carolina General Hospital is a hospital that's conducting that research. What happens now is that the North Carolina Hospital will be responsible to ensure that their name will be on that study. Their name will be on that study document, on that protocol. Once their name is there, the physician's name will be there as well. The address of the lab or any other institution will be written on that protocol. The title template. So this is how a title will sometimes look like. This template is actually adapted by the ICH GCP, the Good Clinical Practice regulations. So it's going to have something like protocol number. Protocol number can be anything, right? It can be 001-009, anything. Funding mechanism. It could be a sponsor, pharmaceutical company. It's going to have the pharmaceutical company name. IND sponsor. So IND means institutional new drug, investigational new drug. That's the meaning of an IND. So investigational new drug sponsor is going to have the principal investigator name, program official, medical monitor, draft the version date of the protocol. The version date is very important because you don't want to give a wrong version of the protocol document to your site. right? Or to any other professional who may be looking, maybe one of your coordinators calls you up and asks you a particular question for a study. You don't want to give them the wrong protocol document. So general information, again, goes a lot about a confidentiality statement. Now, the confidentiality statement is very important. It's a very important piece of the protocol. Why? It usually gives a statement that says, all the information of this document is the confidential property of the sponsor, which means that if a sponsor gives out the confidential information, that protocol document, to the site is not legally allowed to give that protocol to anybody else, because that protocol has not been, it's like they are step-by-step guidelines. It's like giving somebody your secret on how you want to perform your study, right? On how your secret recipe of cooking your particular dish. So you tell that person, do not give this recipe to anybody else, because if anybody else have my recipe, they can compete with me, right? They can use my recipe and prepare the same jollof rice to open similar restaurant. So I'm giving you this document in confidence that you are not going to give this document to anybody else, or you're not going to give this document access. You're not going to grant access to this document to anybody else. This is a statement that you're going to see on all protocols. It's a confidentiality statement. Table of content describe the type and the location of the information within the protocol. Easy reference tool, a guide to familiarize with the terms used in the protocol. They usually have, it's called like, sometimes they call it like glossary. Glossary will mean that's like they have a terminology where, the information will be written within that protocol. Any questions so far?
This question that I needed to ask you. Yes. Oh my God, it just went off. But when I just think of it again, I'll put it down so that I'll not forget. Because this question I needed to ask. I didn't want to stop you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Background information. The background information is primarily about the investigational product. They want to define the investigational product. What is the investigational product? They're able to describe the name of the drug, because we've talked about the first part, which is like the introduction, right? The general information. Now moving to the background information. So it provides a summary of non-clinical studies. Remember, in our previous lecture, we talked about before a clinical trial comes to the clinic, it goes through the lab. It goes through research that's being done in the lab. This research is done on animals, rats, mice, just depends. All of the research performed outside of the clinic is called non-clinical studies. Now, all the data that has been collected during that time will be collected and put together in a document called investigator brochure, or for sure you can call it IB. The investigation brochure will have a summary of everything that you need to know about that particular drug. It's also going to have all the risk involved, all the side effects that were experienced by the animals, and will also have potential side effects that may be impacted by humans when they involved in the study. Now, what does that mean? All of that information will be in summary put into the protocol document. A summary of any potential risk or benefit that human subjects may experience. A description and the justification of the route of administration, which we explain, because in this background information section, they are also explaining that this drug will be taken by mouth twice daily. This drug will be taken, the patients are going to be in this study for 2 years or 1 year, right? It's going to be taking 5 milligrams per day. So this background information It contains information that has to do with the route of administration, the dosage of the regimen, the treatment period, and pretty much everything that you need to know about a particular drug. Then it also goes further to describe the population to be studied. It tells you that we are going to study patients who have type 2 diabetes, who have had type 2 diabetes between the age of 18 to 50 or 18 to 60. So it gives you reference to the background information as well as the study population. The clinical trial objectives. The third section of the clinical trial protocol is the clinical trial objectives. It has the detailed description of the objective and the purpose of the trial. So it has a description of why are we conducting this trial today? Why are we conducting this particular trial? Is there any particular reason why we are conducting this trial? It contains hypotheses that should be stated. If more than one hypothesis is being tested, then indicate the primary and secondary hypothesis. Any questions?
No.
Trial design. The clinical trial design is a very important section. It describes the phase of the study, the type of study, if the study is going to be double-blind, single-blind, parallel design, which we're going to be talking about in subsequent lectures. It also goes about to explain the number of subjects that will be enrolled at each site. Remember, when we talk about the responsibility and those who are responsible, the clinical research development team, we talk about the statistician. The statistician's role was to ensure that they look at the statistics to understand how many patients do we need for this study. Now, that means that the statistician is developing something called a trial design, the trial design section. That's what they are mostly involved in. Now, they'll also be looking at the specific statement of the endpoints, the duration of the study. How long is it going to take us to enroll these patients? Is it going to take us 2 years to enroll 100 patients? Is it going to take us 5 years to enroll 2,000 patients? All of that information will be included in this section called the trial design section. The study population selection. Now, in the study population selection, in this section, it defines the population from which the participants should be drawn from. It provides description of the illness, the condition, and all health events, the number of subjects, the determination of the sample size, decision of taking the subject into the trial or not included in the trial on the basis of inclusion and exclusion criteria. Before a patient gets into the study, they have to go through something called inclusion and exclusion criteria. The inclusion and exclusion criteria are the criteria that the sponsor have put in place to understand that, okay, we can't just go out there to the street to enroll everybody into the study. We have particular group of patients that we want to enroll them into the study. And this particular group of patients are people called the study population. How do you select them? These are patients that particularly may have a particular disease. It may be patients that have type 2 diabetes. They've had type 2 diabetes for how long? Maybe for 10 years, maybe for 2 years, or sometimes we may say recently diagnosed patients that were diagnosed between 2 months ago or between 6 months ago. Those are patients that you want. So all of this determination are information that will be included in the section called the study population selection section. An example of an inclusion criteria we'll say that the subject must have the disease of interest. If you are studying a drug, if you're having a study for cancer patients, you're not going to include patients that do not have cancer, right? You're only going to include patients that have cancer. which means that if you are looking at the inclusion criteria, everything before a patient qualifies to be in that study, everything on that inclusion criteria for them must be yes. It means that, for example, they're going to ask a question: patient is 18 to 75 years. Yes. Patient has cancer. Yes. Patient has this. Yes. Then the exclusion criteria, just like the word says, excluded, right? If any patient qualifies or have any of the particular the criteria that are listed within that exclusion criteria list, they will be excluded from the trial, which means they will not be able to get into the trial. Exclusion criteria, when present, restrict the patient to be considered a research subject. All in exclusion criteria must be no for a patient to qualify into the study. Now, withdrawal of consent of subject. Before we move to this section, any questions?
No.
Okay. So remember, a protocol document has been written by the sponsor, right? They give that protocol document to the site, telling the doctors, this is what I want you to do. In order for you to perform, in order for you to participate in the study, these are the things I expect for you to do. These are the rules I need you to follow. I need you to follow the rules of inclusion, of selecting this particular group of patients to be enrolled into the study. I also need you to follow these particular rules in order to withdraw a subject from a study. Now, some of the rules that when it comes to withdrawing of subject means that the subject wants to or required to discontinue the trial. Remember, when patients enroll into the study, like we look at the regulations framework, it's their 100% volunteering opportunity for them to volunteer to become participants in the study. They cannot be forced to get into the study. If they are forced to get into the study, that's actually a criminal act. Because they volunteer to join to the study by their free will, they also have the same free will to withdraw themselves from the study. At any point in time, a subject can say, I don't want to be part of the study anymore. No questions asked. A coordinator will say, okay, or the doctor will say, okay, no problem. Subject himself not willing to participate. Those are some of the reasons. The safety concerns of the subject. Another instance, the physician, who is the principal investigator at the site, may decide to withdraw a patient, a subject, from the study. If they observe that the patient is not gaining any significant clinical benefit. One of the places where we saw this recently was when we looked at the Helsinki guidelines. One of the 10 Helsinki guidelines was that it is the responsibility of the experimental investigator to ensure that they are able to withdraw the patient from that study if their patient is no longer getting any clinical benefit. The investigator may also withdraw the patient. No subject can be withdrawn abruptly. Abrupt withdrawal may lead to serious complications of a certain studies. For example, before a patient withdraws from a study, a patient can you can have a patient in type 2 diabetes study, right? This patient comes into the clinic, they've been in the study for like 1 year or 6 months, and they say, I don't want to be part of the study anymore. They just poof right away, right? The protocol have guidelines, rules, and regulations in order to address subjects that withdraw. Because subjects are in the study, that the study have risk. They're participating in a clinical trial, first of all, it's risky, right? Now, when a patient just calls on the phone and say, I don't want to be part of the study anymore. Now, what do? There have to be safety guidelines. Most protocols, or almost every protocol that I have seen, have actually had something called safety follow-up. The patient may say they don't want to take their drug anymore. Maybe they don't like somebody in the clinic. They say, I don't want to come to the site anymore. I don't want to be part of the study anymore. It's the responsibility of the investigator to call the patient and ask safety questions. How do you feel? Do you have any adverse event? Have you been hospitalized? So the primary reason why the doctor is asking those questions is to determine if the subject's concerns of withdrawal is about safety, because it's their responsibility as physicians to ensure the safety and well-being of every trial patient or participant. The protocol will state something. When and how do withdrawals from a trial or a product occurs? The type and the timing of the data to be collected from a withdrawal subject. Whether and how subject can be replaced. Because sometimes if a sponsor says, we are going to have 1,000 patients for this study, what happens now is that even though the data, remember the statistician may say, in order for us to meet our endpoints, we need to enroll 1,000 patients. But now, in order for them to enroll that 1,000 patients successfully, they need to enroll about 1,500. Why? Because sometimes patient will withdraw. Sometimes patient will screen fail. Sometimes patient will decide not to discontinue. Sometimes patients will be called lost to follow-up. So because of all these unforeseen circumstances that are involved in the process, it makes it possible now for us to put an outlier. So we can, if we really need 100 patients, we should really say we are going to enroll 1,500. No, if we really need 100, we're going to say we're going to enroll about 150. So that if there's a possibility that 50 patients may not qualify, 50 patients may withdraw, or anything may happen for those 50 patients. But if anything happens with those 50 patients, at the end of the day, we still have our 100 patients to meet our objectives. Any questions?
What if in a case where there's a patient who says she wants to withdraw, then now the principal investigator calls like the safety follow-up, right? And the patient is not willing to give any information.
At that point in time, everything in healthcare that I love is about documentation.
Okay.
If the investigator make an attempt, usually what I've noticed is that patients respect their physicians, their doctors, right?
Okay.
If it happens that the patient refuses to pick the doctor's call, or saw the doctor's call coming and reject it, or listen to the voice message and no avail, we have as a standard, we make 3 attempts for follow-up. The investigator will make 3 attempts to follow up. If those 3 attempts all fail, what happens now is that the investigator will document all of those 3 attempts and consider that patient as a loss to follow up.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So the main reason why they are calling, like why the investigator is doing the safety follow-up, is to ensure that the patient is safe.
That's correct.
Okay, like maybe the patient has started the study, then maybe along the line the patient has to withdraw. There can be maybe an adverse event,
Right.
So okay, all right.
Now, if adverse events occur, adverse events is not a reason for a patient to withdraw. If a patient withdraws, if a patient has an adverse event, right? Because part of that consent document, part of the things that we usually mention in the consent document is that you are signing this consent because you know that this is a test. And you also sign the consent in acknowledging that there are possibilities that you're going to have adverse events. Now, if these adverse events occur, a patient experience adverse events, they come to the hospital. The doctor will treat them, provide them treatment. But if a patient just say, you know what, I'm sick and tired of this, I really want to withdraw, I don't care about this research anymore, I don't want to come to your clinic anymore. At that point in time, the physician take a step back and say, okay, I'm not going to push you to take the study drug, but now I'm just calling you to check up on you. Are you okay? Have you experienced any new adverse events? Are you getting out of the study because of adverse events? So because all the data that the physician is collecting will be reported as part of the data that was collected for that study. Does that make sense?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We move to treatment of subjects. Now, the protocol document will provide guidelines for the treatment of subjects. It provides information of the treatment to be administered, the name of the drug, the dose of the drug, the dosing schedule, which means that how frequent do the patients come to the clinic for treatment, the route of administration, is it by mouth, is it by IV, how do they administer that medication, the treatment period, for how long are the patients going to be treated. Most studies usually have a follow-up period. The follow-up period for subjects for each investigational product for the treatment arm, it will explain to them what kind of follow-up, at what points they are supposed to have their follow-up visits. Assessment of safety. So safety assessment. Protocol describes the process of evaluating and ensuring the safety of the research subject. So now we've talked about the treatment. Now looking at the safety. The protocol will tell the investigator how the investigator should be able to perform safety for their subjects. Protocol describes the process of evaluating and ensuring the safety of research subjects. It looks at how will the safety be measured. It looks at safety parameters. When we talk about safety parameters, now consider that a patient comes to the hospital. They have a fever. Fever is, you can rate the fever by, you can say this is a grade 1 or a grade 2 fever. How do the doctor know that that's supposed to be a grade 1 or a grade 2? All of this information is information that has been written in the protocol. If a test result comes back negative or positive, a test result comes and is abnormal, what happens? The protocol will state information to the doctor, telling the doctor what to do when the test result comes back abnormal. So at the end of the day, you see that research, if anybody can follow the protocol, they can conduct research. Does that seem feasible?
Yeah.
You can follow the protocol diligently, you can conduct the research. But now you have to be, in order for you to be part of that research, you have to then be a medical professional, because you're going to use your medical judgment to judge and evaluate patients. Statistics. The protocol also have a statistics section. The statistics section will describe the statistics to be used, the statistical method to be used, the software to be used in order for them to read the data. Remember, at the end of the day, we've collected all the data, we've done patients coming to the site, we've collected the data, CRA have reviewed the data. At the end of the day, we have to do something with the data. We have to analyze the data and make clinical justification. So once we're able to analyze the data, the analysis will be something that we can then use, send out there to FDA. FDA now will then look at the study report, then decide to justify if this study is meaningful or not. Direct access to source data and documents. Now, as we're collecting patients' information, patients come to the clinic, we collect their data, we collect their height, their weight, their name, their birth control, we collect everything about the patient. The sponsor should also ensure that the protocol or other agreement specifies the investigator will permit the trial-related monitoring. It means that what this actually means that first, the site will let this, in that protocol, the sponsor is writing the protocol to tell the site that we will love to have direct access to the data that you collect. Because when the patient comes to the site, right, the patient is giving the data to the site. Now, how will the sponsor have access to that data? That access must be provided by the site. We also look at the IRB, Institutional Review Board, or Institutional Ethics Committee review, and the regulatory inspection. So all of these are third-party vendors. So IRB are coming from outside, right? IRB are coming from outside. They are looking at the data. All of this information are information that we collect we're looking at the data that has been collected from the subjects. All the sales data and the source data and the case report forms must be available to the auditors, the monitors, or regulatory authority on demand. So you see that the protocol also tells the investigator that, hey, even though you are collecting the data from the patients, I would love to have access to that data. So if an investigator is signing that consent form, that protocol document, what they are signing is that I agree that I'm going to provide information. I'm going to provide you access to the patient data. Any questions?
Like the source document, that that's what they use to, like, for example, the CRA goes to the site, collects data, right?
Review data.
Yeah, collects that data. So the sponsor needs to have, like, to get data from the site. So it's from the source document.
Yes. So what happens is that a source document will be created. Once the patient comes to the visit, they collect the vital signs, collect their weight, collect their blood, all of those collection. When that data is being put or recorded somewhere, that thing is called source document.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
It's called source document. Now, because it's called source documents, right? They need to have the monitor comes on site. The monitor is a sponsor representative. The monitor comes on site. The monitor have to then review the data to ensure that the data was collected according to the protocol, to ensure that the data was the study has been conducted, the data was collected according to how the protocol required. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So each patient has a source document.
That is correct. Okay. Each patient have their own source document. Now, what you observe when you go, as you go into the site, is that each patient will have something called a chart. If you see this is a chart, right? This is an example of what a chart will look like. Can you see?
Yeah, I can.
So the binders, as you can see in that little circle, is that each subject may have something like this. Their name, their subject number will be here, their protocol number to identify the protocol and identify the subject on this little section. Sometimes they will put it on the front cover page, on this front cover. They will have the subject name, subject ID, subject information, everything. Now, when the patient comes to the site, they will print after the visit, they will print from the EMR, from the electronic medical record, they'll print it and they file it in this binder. Once they file it in the binder, a monitor comes on site. You as the monitor, you are then looking at this binder and to ensure that the document, the review, you are looking at to ensure that the protocol was followed when they were collecting this data. If at any point in time you realize that there's a mistake, you will flag it and tell them that there's a mistake. Now, even though the site is collecting this data in this document, right? This is not the only thing that you are going to see. Now, how do you know that a subject has actually been consented or a patient is going to be on the site? The sponsor will have something called EDC system. right? You have something called the electronic data capture system. So the electronic data capture system, let me bring my pen. I love to write. The electronic data capture system will be something that tells, no, where's my color? Where's my color? I love to, no, let me look black. Okay. The electronic data capture system, oh, it's not writing. Oh, no. Anyway, the electronic data capture system is used by the site to enter the data, right? Now, the site will put in the data. They will say that the patient came, the patient blood pressure was 120 over 90, over 30, over 90. They'll put it in. Now, they'll put that data in that EDC system, you as the CRA, you can see the data because you also have access to the EDC. Even though you are not at the site, right? You are at your company office or even in your home office. You can see the data that I have put in that EDC. But now, how can you verify if that data is true? You have to go to the site, right? Once you go to the site, able now to verify and see that, oh, and you notice that ridiculously, study coordinators make a crazy amount of mistakes. Like I was at the site yesterday. A patient blood sample was collected at 10:13 a.m. according to the source document. But when I look at it on the EDC system, the coordinator entered that the blood sample was collected at 10 o'clock, 10:00.
Oh.
Now, you see that, but why would she say that it's 10:00 when it was 10:13? Right? It's an oversight. That's the reason why there's a need for that data verification. So as a CRA, you go to the site to ensure that, okay, even though the coordinator have put in the system that the data was collected at 10 o'clock, 10:00, let me just double check to see if that's entirely accurate. Then when I went to the document, I saw that the data was actually collected at 10:13. Then I have to tell the coordinator to fix it. Then they say, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't even know what happened to me. You know, we're humans, right? These errors occur all the time. Now, quality control, ethics, and financing. Quality control and quality assurance is also another piece of information that's being entered in the protocol. The protocol will define the parameters to ensure that data is collected, high quality data is collected. Ethical principles must also be followed. The protocol describes the ethical considerations related to the trial. Then it goes about to talk about the financing. Financing and insurance are generally addressed on a separate document. Usually, because finances are sensitive information, sometimes the study coordinator who reads the protocol every day does not know anything about the finances of the protocol, because some clinical research sites or clinics or institutions usually like to separate the financial contract information outside of the protocol. They want to save it. They like to save that information in the contract agreement so that the coordinator does not have direct access to that financial information. Data handling and record keeping. So the protocol also goes ahead to emphasize how will the data be handled, the data that we collect for this subject. When we collect the data, how will the data be handled? First of all, are we going to collect the data properly? The sponsor is going to create something called case report forms, CRFs. So case report forms is a form that the sponsor will create to match the protocol. What does that mean? That simply means that if, for example, the sponsor says on visit 1, collect blood pressure, weight, height, temperature, the sponsor is going to create a case report forms that will indicate that visit 1, weight, height, temperature, and would then allow a line for the site to put that information that they collect. That case report form will now be completed will be filled out, then be filed inside that subject binder or the subject chart. Now, this is not applicable to every study. Some study sponsors may decide to have case report forms for a particular study. Some may just decide to just not have case report forms. And when they do not have case report forms, how will the data be collected? Now, the data will be collected based on the protocol, and the data will be recorded in the electronic record system, which means that electronic record system will the data that will be collected in that electronic record system will be printed out and filed inside that binder. So when you as a CRA, you come to the site during your monitoring visit, you are looking at that binder and also looking at the electronic medical record system alongside with the EDC. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Publication.
So, sorry,
yes.
I have a question. So the case report form, the monitor always has it at any visit on the site?
Yes.
Okay.
But the case report form is not something that the monitor carries along with them. It's like a form, right? The form was created by the sponsor when they created the study. The form has fields, information section that says, put weight and height that was collected. You can write it down, weight and height. You can write the weight, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, the height, 5 feet 2, right? So now, once the coordinator will be the one to fill that case report form during that visit. When the patient comes, coordinator will fill that case report form, right? Now that case report form now will be completed and saved at the site. Then when the monitor comes for a monitoring visit, then they are able to review that case report forms based off that protocol.
Okay.
Yeah. So publication policy is usually something that we discuss at the clinical trial agreement. Now, but what does the publication policy mean? Now, when doctors participate in research, when they conduct research, it's a pride for them, right? Because now they've also been boasting their career. They have boasted their reputation to say, oh, I have actually participated in research, I conducted research, we do and do so and so and so and so and so. It's a boost to their career. The best boost to their career is when their names get written on the publication, because when studies get, when a research study is conducted and is completed, it gets published in the National Registry of Medicine. It gets published. Now, it's a pride for the investigator, for a doctor, to know that their name has been written in the publication, that has been kept at the National Registry. It's a pride for them, and they can make reference to that on their resume to say that I was an principal investigator on so and so and so and so study. Now, supplemental documents. Supplemental documents are documents that will usually be accompanied by the protocol. Documents will include informed consent form, the copy of a case report form, standard operating procedures, schedule of study events, laboratory values and ranges, or other case report forms as well. So these are all documents that when a sponsor is sending the protocol to the site, because once the protocol has been reviewed by the sponsor and approved, the sponsor has decided to approve the protocol, and they will then send the protocol to the site. They will not just send the protocol, right? They'll send the protocol document, they send the informed consent, they'll send all the documents that accompanies that protocol. Now, miscellaneous things, like we talked about earlier. If at any point in time there's a variation on the protocol, either intentional or unintentional variation of the protocol, if they decide to say, if the site notice that there's a change in the protocol, or the sponsor decides that, oh, we need to change something on this protocol, then that change is called an amendment. Any changes made to the protocol must be approved by the IRB before they can be implemented, which means that if, for example, the sponsor say we are going to change, instead of having 10 inclusion criteria, let's have 11. Now they add one more inclusion criteria. What does that mean? That means that that protocol must be revised. They will change the protocol. They will go to the IRB. The IRB will approve it before they send that protocol back to the site. So the site cannot implement any changes without the IRB's approval of that protocol. Any question?
So the FDA does not approve a protocol?
The FDA approved the protocol the very first time.
Okay.
The very first time that the protocol was created. Remember, when a sponsor create that, when a sponsor has completed that non-clinical study, they are sending their IND application, investigational new drug application. That investigational new drug application would then be accompanied by the protocol. Once the investigation, the FDA approves the protocol, then they're approving them to initiate the study at the clinic, at the clinical level. So FDA reviews the protocol. Now, protocol checklist. Protocol checklist format is intended as a guidance for suggesting, for writing protocols, or identifying issues by a scientist. Now, the protocol checklist will be a document that says, and this, let me just go to the example. So this is how a protocol checklist would look like. If you as a sponsor, you are writing the protocol. You want to look at the sections to identify it, to make a list to ensure that everything has been captured, right? So you're looking to say, okay, general information. Do we have general information? Check. Yes. Protocol identifier, background information. Do we have background information? Check. Objective and purpose. Do we have it? Yes. So this is just a checklist to support the decision or to support the protocol creation process. Because at any point in time, when a protocol is being created, it's easy for them to have to make an error, right? It's easy to have an error, a mistake. So what happens now is that this protocol has to be written in such a way that they're able to capture most times sponsor will have this protocol checklist document first as they are creating the protocol and they're almost done, or even if they said they have come out with a draft, they have to then go through the checklist to ensure that all the important sections of the protocol has been identified and captured. The same thing here for the different sections of the protocol. Same thing here as well. Yeah.
Okay, so the protocol checklist, they check it by the main protocol.
Yes, you are checking the protocol checklist to ensure with that main protocol document to ensure that everything that they plan to do has been captured.
Okay. All right.
According to ICH GCP regulations.
Okay.
Yes. So this again goes back to the protocol checklist. Just like we talked about, we've got choose section like statistics, direct access to source documents, quality control, publication, finance, insurance, and data handling. Now, one more thing I want to say, statement of compliance. Now, the statement of compliance, it provides the trial. It means that the trial will be conducted in accordance because the protocol must be signed by the sponsor, by the sponsor and the investigator. The sponsor has created a protocol and they send it over to the site. They say, okay, site, this is a study that we are going to create, right? Now, once the sponsor sends out the protocol, the investigator will read the protocol. They have to sign it. But why does the investigator have to sign it? Do you know?
So can you repeat that one more time?
Why is it important for the investigator to sign the protocol document?
To make sure that it's in compliance with the protocol and good clinical practice.
That is correct. So the investigator must sign the protocol to acknowledge that, yes, I, Dr. Malay, I have read the protocol. I agree to conduct research, to conduct this protocol in accordance to United States Code of Federal Regulations, GCP regulations, and ICH standard. So they're going to sign, they put their name, their title, and the date that they sign. Once they sign it, they send it back to the sponsor, so the sponsor will have it on their record. Now, if at any point in time, the investigator deviates from the protocol, it's called a protocol deviation, which means that they intentionally do something which is not in the protocol. That's called a protocol deviation. The protocol deviation is not a big crime. It's not a crime, right? But if it becomes very consistent for a particular site, if it becomes consistent for a particular site, then it's flagging. The sponsor will start thinking that this doctor have a problem. We have to go and conduct an audit, like we talked the other day, right?
Yeah.
Now, what is the role of a CRA in a protocol development? Very important. As a CRA, clinical research associate, you may not be involved when it comes to the protocol development process. However, you will be involved in the monitoring the protocol compliance at the site. You'll be involved in making sure you understand the protocol so much that coordinators will rely on you, right? You have to be the most reliable person that the coordinator or the site will reach out to. You assess the presence of important trial elements and medical information when it comes to the protocol when you go to the site. Coordinators are usually not involved in protocol development process at all. They are not involved. So, protocol versus investigator brochure. An investigator brochure is kind of a similar document, but it does not have information about the study. It has primarily basic information about a particular drug. Remember, we talked about this in the investigational brochure, which we're going to have a whole lecture by itself about the investigator brochure. But just to give you a little heads up of what it is, the investigator brochure document is a document that will give you detail of information that was collected for non-clinical study, the study that was conducted at the lab, at the level of the lab, right? So it's going to give you more information about that study. It's going to give you information about the safety issues that were observed during that lab testing. It's going to give you information about like the risk and some of the benefits that were experienced. And the most important piece that I want you also to understand is that when a study moves from phase 1 to phase 2, all the data that was collected in phase 1, in summary, will be added to the investigator brochure. So the investigator brochure is a document that will have most up-to-date information, but also historical information about that particular drug. It's different from the protocol. The protocol educates the study personnel about the clinical trial and has detail of each activity to be conducted from start to finish, while the investigator brochure provides information about the particular drug. So you see that the investigation brochure is primarily focused on the particular drug, while the protocol is involved of all the information about the particular trial. Any questions?
No.
And that brings us to the end of our slide for training today. Key takeaways I want from you to understand. The protocol document details activities of the trial from start to finish, like we saw. It's a key document to comply with GCP regulations to minimize chances of error, and it's also reference on the case of doubt and need. Any deviation from the protocol must be documented and explanation with a specific period of time. Writing a protocol starts with scientific question. Everyone involved in creating a protocol should have a clear idea for the primary research question being asked. Confidential statement is introduced to ensure that the receiver should understand the importance of maintaining confidentiality of the document and the process. And that brings us to the end at 9:30. How cool is that?
Wow.